Okay, recording has started. So welcome to Technology 101, AI innovation and how to get started. Uh, for today's agenda, we're going to be going through a few things. First of all, we'll start by discussing why technology matters, the risks of getting it wrong, where we can go through some statistics of business failures and why those happen, how to get started, and how to also plan for success. And we'll end the session with a Q&A portion as well, just so you can ask questions as they come up. First of all, we're going to just set a few house rules. Rule one is, of course, the session is being recorded. I appreciate not everyone can make it today. This won't include a recording of yourselves, but we will be able to share that afterwards with you. Next thing is that you'll notice that your camera and microphone are likely disabled. This isn't going to be a participation session in terms of that visual element, so do feel free to kind of sit back, relax, take in the content. If you are able to, have a look at maybe saying do not disturb, and just so you don't get distracted along the way as well. There is a Q&A at the end. To access the Q&A in the bottom right of Google Meet, there are three little shapes. You should be able to click on that and go to a Q&A section. This allows you to ask questions publicly and anonymously. Refer to that as well, and you can upvote and downvote questions as you prefer, just so we can make sure we're answering the most efficient things for you. And last but not least, we're a very big fan of getting feedback and also suggestions for future webinars. So after this, we will be sending out just a quick feedback survey. It'd be very short, but it just gives us an opportunity to improve. And on top of that, it gives us an opportunity to look at what you might want to learn next in our upcoming webinars. We're looking at performing them once a month, so look out for that. First of all, who am I and why am I speaking to you all? So my name is Adam Liff. I've worked in technology now for over 12 years, if I can believe it. I am a specialist in launching successful digital products and helping businesses drive growth by using technology. I have a master's degree in mathematics and computer science, a very long time ago, I must admit, but I have expertise in both AI and cryptography. More specifically, if you are interested, I was specializing in natural language processing in that branch of AI. I partner with investor groups and investors to help startups secure funding and scale successfully. I've supported startups through multi-million-pound funding rounds, as well as high-profile acquisitions, and I am a huge advocate in using technology for good. I can't understate being able to use technology simply and impactful to drive actual and real-world change. That's one of the reasons why I had led to start the company Contic, where we're looking to really make technology simple for company and drive results that really matter. We're a big advocate of partnering with businesses and making technology an enabler rather than a blocker for what they're trying to achieve. Really making sure that their technology can match their short and long-term vision goals. And we're, of course, a huge advocate of positive change using our expertise as well. We do lots of pro bono work and work with charities to help endangered species or school children, just to name a few. So just to align with you all, I want to make sure you're all in the right place and in the right webinar. This webinar specifically is designed for people fitting into these 6 categories. Whether you're a founder or a CEO with a great idea but don't really know how to get started, or potentially you're just feeling overwhelmed by technology or technology decisions or decisions that have been made for yourselves and you're not quite sure where to start or how to navigate that. Potentially you're struggling with slow progress or spiraling costs of a product that is just not delivering value and you feel potentially like you're in a rut. Maybe you're curious about AI and innovation, but you're not too certain how to get started effectively. Potentially you're looking at ways of validating your product and making sure that your tech foundations are strong so that when you gain more customers and you have more momentum, you can make sure you have long-term sustainable growth. Or potentially you're just looking for practical tips to avoid some technology pitfalls or a way to be able to judge your existing technology team just to see how things are going. I believe there should be a little poll in the section as well. If you could indicate which bucket you are a part of, that would be fantastic. It's great for us to know this. Yeah, I think there's some votes for struggling with slow progress and spiraling costs, which is fascinating, a very common problem we do see. So the first section we want to really talk about is why technology matters in the first place. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, technology is probably an aspect of every single part of our lives. Even in the smallest of villages in the UK, technology is everywhere. Now, I think the CEO of Microsoft said it on stage the best a few years ago, where she said that every company is now a software company. You have to think of that like a digital company. It's no longer just about procuring one solution and deploying one solution. It's not one simple thing. I don't think you can really say it better now. It doesn't matter how big or small you are or how local or global you are. Your technology strategy is now mostly your business strategy as well. Even if I go down to my hairdresser in my local town, their entire business strategy is based around what apps they can plug into, how they can get more traffic, how they can reach more people, how they can get more of a reach on Instagram or Facebook, and how they can really start delivering content and delivering, their value to customers more efficiently, and looking at using technology to scale. And what's most interesting now is over 70% of small businesses are using digital tools to manage all their operations, including both customer engagement and marketing as well. We live in a world, unfortunately, where you can't really escape technology anymore. It's the way we communicate, and it's the way we scale and thrive and let everyone know what we're doing and how we're doing it. For myself, technology matters for three buckets, really. The first one is to drive customer experience. I think Netflix has probably the most high-profile company that's done this the best. They've potentially revolutionized the entertainment industry. Gone are kind of the days where you go onto Sky or Virgin and try and pick your packages. Nowadays, it's all about, which streaming services are going to be provided, and which ones they're going to bundle up with your packages as well. And the way that they've done that is largely through AI-powered recommendations, really trying to use the power of AI to, push their content forward and use the data to drive new content, making sure you have a fully personalized experience. And of course, they kind of really were big advocates of that subscription monthly model as well, which is nowadays completely normal. But their vision really was to make sure that the best customer experience was possible. You can watch your favorite shows anywhere online on the internet. The second biggest bucket for myself would be enabling growth and scalability. A lot of people will know Amazon and how they started off selling books, but what most people don't know is that well over 50% of the internet is running on Amazon Web Services right now. They have servers over the entire world, and they started off by building their own internal technology to advocate for their online shop. And that has grown and grown and grown and spiraled to, even Netflix runs on Amazon Web Services. Almost all companies do. And the third bucket is, of course, creating new opportunities. As technology advances, obviously we've had a big open AI boom recently with chat and video and audio or speech recognition. New opportunities arise. Uber managed to combine just GPS, mobile apps, and payments to completely redefine a new industry. And all of these ideas are just a fantastic way of how technology can really just thrive from the smallest of creations. And what's the most interesting stat that I found was that businesses that actually adopt digital tools will grow twice as fast against those who don't. And they're 50% more likely to survive for more than 5 years as well. So it's in our best interest, really, to embrace technology and kind of join the ride. And this kind of leads me on to the real risks of getting it wrong. So if you are a CEO or founder, I apologize in advance. But what you're more than likely going to have seen is someone's giving you these stats at some point to say that, 20% of startups fail in their first year, or 90% of startups fail in their first 10 years. But I think what's the most interesting thing about these stats is when you start to dive into the reasons why startups fail, it really highlights the statistics and like the interconnectedness between how their strategy, their teams, and the technology that they're trying to push for is really affects whether they're going to succeed or not succeed. So what we're going to go into very briefly now is the top 6 reasons that companies fail first. And then I think what we'll do after that is dive into a section to discuss how we can kind of look to avoid these and what decisions we can make to make our chances much better. So the number one reason why companies fail is that they build something that nobody wants. And it's the most fascinating thing. And I've personally seen it time and time again from my experience working with, hundreds of companies. People will build something which could be technologically marvelous, or potentially it's the best idea, but down to their execution or down to the fact that they're ignoring their customers or not speaking to their customers, they fall out and find that there's no market need. Or the other thing that you tend to find is that founders get so focused on the same idea that they will go away and build the products and build it in a way that is quite rigid. And by the time they get the customer over the course of 12 or 18 months, it's too late. And either that need's gone or the fact that they've not talked to the customers means they've misaligned it entirely. So that brings me on to the second biggest reason that startups fail. With a 29% chance, most of the time it's because they've run out of cash. This is especially for companies that are seeking seed funding or they've had their Series A or Series B. As soon as you do that, you almost have a ticking time bomb. Not necessarily a bomb, but there's a race to reach revenue targets ahead of running out of that cash flow to prove the product. And one of the issues potentially is that as companies get a huge injection of cash into the system, they can spend and plan and really have a strategy to grow. But unless they're balancing that with revenue and how they can innovate for their customers, they can very quickly realize that, potentially their idea isn't going to work, or potentially they don't have the time to keep iterating and keeping up with their customer expectations. The third biggest reason startups fail is that 23% chance is that they just don't have the right team. And I've seen this time and time again as well. There's potentially just a lack of technical expertise or a misalignment towards the goal of what they're trying to achieve. And having both of these things in unison is absolutely critical. You must have a clear vision of where you're going, and you must have the technical foundations to get you there as well. I've seen so many times where non-technical founders bring in the wrong person or the wrong team. And all that happens is that they commit or experiment with the wrong technology. And they end up in a poor situation where, although things might start off well, they've built things in such a way that 6 months later, the companies are struggling with tech debt, or they're struggling with innovating features, or they're deploying once a month or once every 6 months. And it's really starting to, cripple the company's progress. It is critical to make sure that when we're starting out, that we're starting things with the right team and the right expertise for the short and long-term goals of the company. And that includes, all your staff and people you bring here as well. For the fourth major reason, 20% is just getting outcompeted by the market. Failing to stay ahead in a competitive market. Someone's got there before you, someone's doing it better than you, someone's doing it cheaper than you. Innovation and rapid development is always key. And we've seen this year more than ever, really. According to a recent statistic, 80% of companies have pivoted this year alone to try and fast track open AI products or some sort of chat functionality, or image functionality, or video functionality into their existing products ahead of their competitors. And what's most fascinating is that most of these companies haven't really seen profitable results from this. But the ruthlessness to try and stay ahead and get there first is really such a big driving factor for existing companies and small companies alike. The next reason, number 5, is pricing and cost issues, not really getting the value to cost ratio right with an 18% fallout. So what we really find here is, and what's more important than ever, is that aligning with customers and making sure that even if it's just like a general survey or a competitor analysis to find pricings, how can we do it slightly cheaper? How can we provide more value is key. And it's not just about finding the right price point. I've seen too many times as well that companies hemorrhage themselves by underselling, by landing the really big deal, but offering themselves potentially so cheaply that they set themselves up for failure later on when they start adding more features. Or if they do oversell, they'll find that even if they do make the short-term sale, when it comes to renewal, those customers are falling out as well. It's incredibly important to align what we're doing with pricing. And last but not least, 17% chance is they just have a poor product. The technology doesn't work, or it just doesn't solve the problem. One of the things that I always resonate with is you only get one chance at a good first impression. And if it's poor design, poor technology, it's unreliable, the website is just taking too long to load, or potentially it's just confusing, or you've downloaded the app and it's crashed. Those are all lost opportunities. And it's unnecessary as well. I think that's the sad bit about this chat, really. Products don't have to be poor. We just have to make the right choices early on. Now, the biggest takeaway from the real risks of getting it wrong is that these 3 items really fit into 3 buckets. The first one is that to succeed, we need to really solve real world problems that actually matter to people. And we need to do that and provide them with a cost-effective solution. So it's not just about having a good idea. It's about making sure that we can execute it, listen to the customer, adapt, and make sure the price point is there. For the second point, it's about using budgets wisely. And I think this comes down to avoiding just too much risk. Risk is inevitable. We need risk to innovate. We need risk to get ahead. We need risk to start a business in the first place or start a new product line, experiment with it. But there's also too much risk. And the idea is we need to start thinking about minimizing that risk and having a look at what we can do to have the risk, but with minimum outcomes in terms of cost. And the last point, of course, is just building a robust and highly adaptable product. It's crucial to stay ahead, listen to customers, and be able to be in a situation where we can quickly pivot, adapt, add new features, add new products, not just to stay up with competitors, but to also stay up with real world events. I'm not sure about everyone's situation during COVID, and apologies for bringing it up. I realize it was a long time ago. But businesses' ability to adapt at that time really just depended on their survival. And no one could have predicted what would have happened. There's no real downsides to make sure that whatever we're building, whatever business we have, is to make sure that it's robust and we can kind of pivot when we need to. So the question is, if that's the reason why technology companies are failing, and those are the things we need to focus on, how do we really get started in technology? It's a huge space. It is an absolutely huge space. There are so many things to consider. It is very difficult being non-technical to try and navigate what cloud provider you need to use. Do you need to have an app? Do you want to launch your app on iOS or Android or Windows? How do you know where to get started? Well, it's impossible to kind of discuss this without talking about big tech. It really is. Big tech is, well, it's a group of 5 companies, but there's arguably 7 or 8 companies. The big ones we should really be considering is Google, Apple, Facebook/Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft. Almost everything in technology, from devices to servers to software, is dictated by these 5 companies. It would be impossible to try and have it any other way. And out of interest, if you're wondering about the other 3 companies, you could also be arguing at this stage that Tesla, Nvidia, and potentially OpenAI, although they have a weird relationship with Microsoft at the moment, is part of this influential group as well. So let's have a look at these three areas. What you probably need to consider is devices, servers, software. For devices, you don't have too much choice, I'll be honest. 99% of all mobile devices are Apple iPhones or Android worldwide. You are committing to creating an app for Google or Apple. Either way, there's not much room around it. The only other thing you want to probably consider is going to be websites or potentially moving into servers, APIs, and things like that. But even with websites, almost everything engine-wise is going through Google Chrome at the moment. Even Microsoft's new Edge is backed on Google's Chrome. You've got no way of really avoiding some of these technologies. When it comes to servers, gone are really the days of self-hosting, unless you're quite a big company or you have extreme data sensitivity. You're really looking at trying to connect with Google Cloud, AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft Azure. I think the recent stat I looked at was somewhere around 85% of all web traffic is going through those servers right now. Even the American government, there is AWS US government approved servers to allow them to have their information on Amazon as well. Everything is kind of flowing in that direction. And it's kind of a tough decision to make as well. Most people go with Amazon, to be fair, and it's potentially the easiest to use. But there is a variation of choice depending on your team and how to go about that. The last bucket really is software. Now, software is when we start to talk about how do we get our information on a website? How do I get my information on an app? How do I get my information that I want to provide on maybe a VR headset? You're still kind of beholden to the technology, which is mostly open source of these providers. If you're looking to try and provide a website, for example, you're somewhat restricted to trying to use React or potentially Angular. React is produced by Facebook. Angular is produced and managed by Google. For iOS and Android, your options are potentially React Native or Flutter, or just writing them natively in iOS and Android as well. Each of these are technical choices you inadvertently make, even if you're trying to use something obfuscated like Squarespace or WordPress. All of your systems are being managed through this big tech. So it's important to try and consider what really a technology foundation looks like. Now, really, this technology foundation is focused more on seed or series funding startups. However, if you are smaller than that, you are doing this in some way. So we would split this into 5 buckets for any company, really. The first thing we call is the front end. Front end is what users can see and interact with. And this is what I really talk about when I talk about web, or you open an app on your phone, or potentially have a VR headset, or anything in that line, really. Your front end tends to be working with some website or app developers or full stack developers, as well as design services, product management. And this is where working with your customers and seeing how they want to interact with the value that your business is producing is so important. Now, behind the scenes, what most people don't see is things that we call the back end. It's almost like back of house. This is really what powers the Apple website, handles logic, data processing. Potentially, you'll set up some sort of API, which is an interface that allows communication with your data, communication with the value without the need for a front end. The third thing people worry about is infrastructure. So this is when we talk about hosting things on the cloud, hosting things on AWS, or potentially even you host things on like WordPress, or you host something on Squarespace and doing it for you. That is still infrastructure, which is managing your servers, your databases, the network. And this really dictates the performance, scalability, and resilience of whatever you're building. When it comes to DevOps, this is potentially more focused towards seed to series funding, but DevOps is the process of delivering software very efficiently and safely. So what we're looking at is when we make changes, or when your team makes changes, how do you crack, that it's not going to break anything? How is it that deployment works? How can we get features out faster? How can we do A/B or split testing? It's those items where they kind of fit in this DevOps bucket. And last but not least is the data bucket. And this is growing to potentially be the biggest bucket moving forward for any business. How do we collect the data to analyze, store, and produce value for customers? How can we then enhance that data with potentially other data sets and use tools or AI to improve the product or understand how customers and users use our products in the first place? And this is probably the fastest growing bucket we've looked at recently. All the others are relatively well established now. Whatever you decide, whatever your business ends up being, or whatever your product you're trying to produce, a decision has to be made in each of these buckets. And what you'll end up with is a team of potentially designers, developers, product managers, people in operations, or potentially even salespeople or customer success. And I'm briefly and very quickly going to go over ways of working because it can be a little bit boring. But whenever you have a team, you'll probably hear the word Scrum, Agile, Lean. They are different, but the fundamental idea of software development, from what we've learned in the risks, is that we need to be able to test hypotheses. We need to be able to iterate and learn and get things to customers as fast and tight as possible without compromising quality. And there are three main things to do that, really. When everyone talks about agile, really agile is about making sure we have customer feedback and we can increment value continuously. And quite often you might be working with like a Kanban board or something like that. Even in various departments now, sales, marketing, everything else will be kind of using Kanban. What's more applicable to software development teams is Scrum. And the idea of Scrum is a way of organizing teams around a goal, normally between 1 or 2 weeks. So teams will plan and sit down what the next iteration of your product will look like across that course of time. They'll review what's happened. They'll talk to customers. They'll get customers to potentially do some beta testing. And it's all about making sure you're working in sprints to move forward. And then Lean really focuses on the minimization of waste in this process, making sure we're not building the wrong thing, making sure we're not committing to building something really complex which customers don't like. These are generally the three terms you need to know about. AI machine learning different. It's different for a few reasons, really. When you're looking to launch an AI product, the issue is that it's not like you're adding a button to a page. You're not adding a new feature to, a system. Really, what you're trying to do is to take data and build some sort of model, which is based on probability, to produce an outcome. And what happens over time is that you want that probability to really increase. And there's 3 stages that this goes into. So the first thing is you'll decide on data collection, which we'll refer to as a cold start, or you'll do a warm start, which is where you'll find a pre-existing model, such as ChatGPT or Lambda or something like that, Llama, sorry. And what you'll do is you'll collect the data, make sure it's in some sort of structured format for you to be able to start working from, or have a model to be able to start working from. Once that kind of model is collected, you'll go into model training or potentially fine-tuning. So this is when you'll essentially use statistics and training to produce a model similar to what OpenAI have a probabilistic model to produce the results. Fine-tuning is where you take an existing model and you just tweak little things or give it a little bit of extra training data to make it perfect for your use case. And then unlike traditional software, what you really try and do is to get a version of the AI out quite quickly with a reasonably decent probability of success. And then you need to start collecting more data so you can analyze it over time. We often call this like a hybrid strategy because customers shouldn't even know you're doing this. A good example of this is like Deliveroo or Uber Eats. Like most people will have used those services, but most people won't know. They'll have, hundreds of people in teams analyzing that data to pick a better driver next time, pick a better restaurant, give you better recommendations. The whole point of AI and machine learning is to largely produce a model which can set a good baseline and without the user even knowing, make your business experience even better and better and better as time goes on. Now, these are all decisions you kind of have to make. You have to decide a tech partner, you have to decide someone to come and build it for you. You might build it yourself, but you might need to step up and do it all later. It's tough to make these decisions. So what we're going to talk about next is how do you really plan for success? How do you go even about making those decisions, choosing the right team? There's so many recommendations out there. I align strongly with one, which was Steve Jobs. Start with the customer experience and work backwards. This, for me, is the perfect way to explain how to choose a team, how to choose your technology stack, how to decide what you're going to be doing. We need to figure out what value we're providing to the customer experience first, in the short term, in the long term, and then have a look at moving backwards to figure out what that technology stack looks like. Now, a very stark warning to all of you. I think Mark Zuckerberg is very famous for saying move fast and break things. But what we find from experience is that this tends to be quite reckless. It ends up with companies moving into situations that they can't get out of if you don't know what you're doing. It's not a great plan of success to run forward without knowing what's in front of you. And I always kind of refer to this as, I don't know if any of you have ever watched Takeshi's Castle, but it used to be this old show where one of the challenges was that they had a river and they had little stones in the river, and their objective was to get across it as fast as possible. Not necessarily as fast as possible, but they'd have like balls thrown in and things like that. And some of the stepping stones were fake. So if you stepped on them, they would sink and the person would crash out very painfully. It was quite entertaining to watch. This is kind of the mentality of move fast and break things. It's not the way to necessarily succeed. They're throwing themselves forward, and most of the times they're not going to get to the other end. The people that would always succeed would always take a little bit more time and be careful in their approach. They wouldn't have an incorrect footing. They're not taking those unnecessary risks. I always find a better approach to success is an old Chinese proverb. It was called cross the river by touching the stones. The whole idea was to, if the goal is to cross the river, what we really need to be doing is making sure-footed, data-driven decisions by touching forward, make decisions fast and commit and go about it that way. And that really is how we start to plan around technology to succeed. So there are 6 things now that I'm going to present, which I believe are key to making a successful technology product. And these are the decisions we need to make that will influence our technology stack, how we construct things, and how we operate as a business. First one is speed. What we've learned is that we need to plan for success and deliver in small and fast iterations. Speed is about a minimum viable product, which we can validate with users early, and also get features out quickly and continuously. So not move fast and break things, get ourselves stuck at MVP and not be able to build anything, but certainly have strong foundations that allow us to move forward periodically, more features, more customers, more interest. The second major point to consider is agility. We need to be in a situation where flexibility and customer feedback are one together. Whatever system you decide to build, you need to make sure that you can adapt it. You need to make sure that we can add features or pivot and respond quickly and efficiently. The third big point is going to be maintainability. My advice is always to build technology simple, a scalable tech foundation from day one. It needs to be a case where you're adding on building blocks in a positive way. We're not kind of rushing to the finish and cornering ourselves. It needs to be easy to maintain, long-term sustainability, It should scale from day one. The fourth point is we need to ruthlessly be finding market fit. The technology needs to be an enabler of the business. The business needs to be testing assumptions, getting user feedback, testing price points, analyzing user data, looking at new markets. We need a technology stack to support this, not block it. And this leads to the fifth point, really. The validation of ideas is critical. We need to be able to experiment, and this can't be emphasized enough that the tighter the feedback loop, the faster we can get software out, the faster we can get features out to customers, the greater chance of success we're going to have, the less risk we need to take, the less expensive it's going to be. Validating ideas quickly and as fast as possible, or leaning into ideas that work or adapting those that don't, is really key. And the technology stack and the team behind the technology needs to support that. And the last one, of course, is cost. It doesn't need to cost the earth to have technology that supports a business. There are so many different ways to construct something, and it's incredibly important to make sure that we're not overly invested in ideas that aren't going to work. They're going to have unnecessary complexity, that teams are going to go away and not provide customer value, even in the short term and long term. So what I give you is 4 key points I'd really love for you to remember. And this is how you decide a technology stack. The first way is, if you're starting from the beginning, you need to keep your technology stack simple. Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft. I've been in companies where they'll have an iOS developer, an Android developer, a web developer, a back-end developer. Maybe they'll have an infrastructure guy. And by having 5 different languages to begin with, the company will cripple themselves, because maybe the iOS guy will leave, or maybe they decide that customers actually really don't interface with the apps at all. They only want to use the desktop. Then half their team isn't trained to help them do the other half of the stack. At an early stage, it is incredibly important to try and unify, and it's in your best interest to do so as well. There are generally 2 schools of thought in this case. The first one is you have a look at a JavaScript stack. This will allow you to do React Native, React, Node.js. This means that you can have one team that does your iOS and your Android development, and your web development, and your backend development, and potentially your infrastructure as well. And this means that the expertise of your team is unified. If a person leaves, it doesn't matter. Everyone knows what's going on. If you need to push and do more app development, the team can move and emphasize and help the business succeed. This is critical. And it does change slightly the bigger you get. And it also changes based on the expertise of your internal team and what you're working with. If you've got loads of Python developers, your best interest is to go and have a look at some Python. And that's really the other stack. And if you're going down the AI route, it's somewhat the preferred stack as well. Having a look at Django and having a look at TensorFlow or just Scikit. These are all very interesting things that will make life easier and will avoid these pitfalls. By keeping it unified, you can maintain it, you can remain agile as a team, you can produce things at speed. So moving on to the second biggest tip in how to plan and how to move forward. Avoid over-engineering at all costs. I have seen it time and time again. People deciding on day one that they're going to have a really complicated microservice structure, that they're going to use this new technology, that what happens if that happens? What happens if users do this? What happens if users do that? They go down the route of all eventualities to the point where they stagnate, they overplan, they're making overly complex solutions that are more difficult to maintain. It's going to cost more. It's going to take things longer to get out. It needs to be a huge challenge to avoid over-engineering. And one of the challenges that you come across is, what happens if we scale? Well, there's always a simple answer to it. What happens if you scale, right? You only get scaling problems with scale. You only get scaling problems normally when you have customers and you have money coming through the business. It's what we call a champagne problem. If we've got too many users using the website, that's a good thing. We can invest more and do it then. And quite nowadays, to be honest, you can scale in most aspects. Now, the third biggest tip I can offer anyone right now is to avoid proprietary technology. When we've talked about big tech, we talked about Google and Apple and Facebook. All of those offer huge, well-backed open source tools. There are huge communities of technology that allow anyone to pick up and build. We talk about React, we talk about React Native. These all have huge bases that are easy to hire for, easy to train people for. I cannot tell you the number of companies that come to us and they have gone with a company that has proprietary technology. They don't have access to it. The company is refusing to make changes or can't make changes. It is unnecessary. It doesn't cost less money. And I cannot tell you to avoid it enough. I've even this year, we've had customers, partners of us, tell us that they're locked into proprietary technology, and when they've gone to ask for changes, the company have gone back to them to say it's just not in their interest to change it because they'd have to change it for everyone, and they'll charge more than just starting it from scratch. It's kind of crazy. If you see any proprietary technology stuff, just don't do it. Number 4 is unproven technology. This is the other thing that I tend to find, especially in startups. You'll hire engineers, potentially you'll hire engineers with not loads of experience to keep costs down, or you'll work with companies that are really keen to experiment. And one of the issues is that they might always want to kind of introduce unproven technology. Quite often there's fads in technology stacks. I remember at one point it was Arango DB, which was a NoSQL system database for like incredibly high scale systems. And all that happens is that no one knows how to use it. The person that always uses it eventually gets bored of their experiment and potentially leaves. And there's a huge amount of tech debt from the start where you've got an unproven technology in the stack, which is going to stop you and get in your way. And I would say 99% of the time, mainstream technology will catch up with it within 6 months and will be providing the exact same services that it's providing. When we talk about minimizing risk, I'm not necessarily just talking about risk when it comes to, the cost of customer features and the risk of developing something new and checking it and minimizing that. I'm also talking about the risk of like using your technology stack. If you can stick with the majority, or at least where the majority is going, you're in good stead because people are backing it up in their free time in open source technology. If technology is really interesting, it will still be easy to move to that in a year or two. But realistically, there's not been that many waves in front-end or back-end development in the past 10 years. Everything has been relatively static. So what I'm trying to get at for this slide really is to plan for success. What we really need to do is figure out what the goal is. What is it that we're trying to produce for customers? And then we can start to have a look at what is the best stack to get us there. At your stage, 99% of the time, it is going to be keep it simple. Keep it where you can have an agile, fast team and have a look at being able to move forward with trusted technology to get it done and allow it to be an enabler for your business. Don't allow it to be a blocker. Don't allow decisions in that technology stack to, really get your Achilles heel. So this is all well and good, but one of the questions we commonly get is, I've already started something, or maybe it's even you have an existing company, you want to look at an existing product line. How would you even know what the early warning signs are looking for? Well, I tend to think there's 4 key things to look out for. There are common pitfalls that are hiding an absolute abundance of issues in your technology stack. First one is long iteration times. There's something called metrics, which we're not going to get into in this webinar, but just knowing how fast a team is able to take code and get it into production in front of customers. How long does it take for a customer to give me feedback and get it into production? is a huge indicator of performance, is a huge indicator of how healthy a technology stack is. And what you'll find is that the most elite teams will be able to do that in a few hours. And they'll be deploying to production multiple times a day. And that's really key to look out for. The next thing is if you're constantly hearing your team say, oh, we've got too much tech debt, we need to focus 30 to 40% of time on tech debt, oh, we just need to rebuild. It's potentially a little bit too late there, but it is a huge indicator that your technology stack is kind of built up to potentially its maximum, or the team aren't trained enough to understand what's going on. These are huge, huge pitfalls. So a big pitfall I see is just not interacting with customers. People will do sprints, they will do changes for customers, but they'll never get any customer feedback. And one of the issues is that this really dives into the risk that we talked about in like the failures of companies. We have to understand customer inputs, how they're using the products, how we're providing them value, what they find value in and what they don't find value in. And some companies really will convince themselves that they're agile. It becomes a little bit of a buzzword, where really they're working in sprints and potentially, they have a velocity or something like that. But if no one's getting customer feedback and the team isn't interacting with customer feedback, huge, huge red flag. And the last one is really easy to tell, to be honest. If your software doesn't work, if it's buggy, if it just doesn't feel right, or it doesn't look good, that is a great warning sign to say something's just not right. And it can be easily fixable there as well. And that kind of concludes our plan for success, really. I must add that Contic is very much a company where we're technology partners, and we always offer free consultations, even if it's just to walk through what your situation is. We're here to help and really make an impact. So please do let us know if you'd be interested in just having a chat with us. We'd be able to give you some very bespoke advice to try and get you on the right track, or at least get you on a track which is going to allow you to grow and really achieve your vision. And now I believe I've not talked too much, so there's a little bit of time for Q&A. Let me just have a quick look at the questions. Nice. I believe the first question was, would you recommend AI? Do you think it's essential to use it in your company in some way? It's fascinating, actually. It's too early to tell in some cases. So there's been a recent study to show that most companies are adopting AI. Specifically in software development, it is making developers more efficient. However, it's also in the short term making software less reliable at the same time. And I believe that is because at the moment it is much easier to write code right now. It is much easier to get through code reviews, and the quality assurance of it has dropped. So while we're finding that it's efficient for some teams to use as a tool, it is somewhat negatively impacting businesses, where it's making their products more unreliable and more difficult to maintain. So it's very fascinating. In terms of recommending AI to install into your own products, I think it depends on your customer demand. So if you'll find that customers want to use it, it's very easy to, especially we talked about warm starts. This is where we'll take a pre-existing model. Potentially it's a chat functionality, an image functionality. We've worked with companies who want custom voice to speak back to them through the phone, or to be able to talk into the phone instead of doing a feedback form. These are all really interesting use cases right now that are still waiting to be proven, but I wouldn't be saying it's essential. I think it really comes down to the value that your business is trying to provide. I hope I answered that well, but if I didn't, please submit another question and I'll address it again. In terms of the next question, how important is design and branding at early stage? I think one of the key points I was trying to get across really is that minimizing the feedback loop, how fast we can learn from customers, is critical. And there's no faster way to do that than in design and with prototypes, even if it's high or low fidelity prototypes, or if you're really close to customers, or if it's an internal tool, bringing people in to just work with the team a little bit, or get their comments, invite them to a sprint review. I would say that design and branding at an early stage is critical to learn as fast as possible. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can save you an absolute abundance of money and cost down the line. Because as soon as it gets to developers or as soon as it gets to someone building something, it takes longer. The feedback cycle is longer. It takes longer to get to the customer. And if what they've built, the customer's not going to use, all of that is waste. So yeah, if you can get design and branding in, it's kind of critical. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that, something has to be incredibly polished and designed, but just having some ideas and validation can go a long way. And I must add as well that it doesn't matter if the team is given a design or no design. It's not going to change how fast they work in most cases. So if you can invest a little bit in design, you'll get it for free. You won't have to do the work almost twice. So moving on to the next question, what's the best way to choose which technology stack to use? There's two different ways to go about this, I would honestly say. The first way is if you have someone you're already working with, or if you have existing developers or a CTO, then it'd be very important to make sure that they can take the lead on that. If they are super experienced with Python and they're going to be around for the long term, then investing in a Python stack is going to be probably in your best interest. Outside of that, if you're not technical and you're not doing your own huge data collection and AI, nowadays JavaScript is still the best way to go. Program language to program language comparison, someone will always bring up, it isn't as good. But what it excels at is its community. You're able to have team which can produce an iOS app, an Android app, Apple Watch apps, TV apps, websites, servers, everything with just one technology. And the advantage that provides to a company over potentially slightly worse bit of programming language is huge. It doesn't matter if people leave. It doesn't matter if people, get sick. It's not going to affect how you can adapt, move people between different roles to really succeed what you're trying to achieve. The last thing I would say on choosing your technology stack is it can be a little bit complex based on what you're trying to achieve. If you're a much smaller business where you're just looking to try and if you're like a local shop, for example, you're not going to need a development team. You're just not. You're more than likely going to get away with something from potentially Shopify or Squarespace to get up and running quickly. And it's after that stage, really, and that's when it gets more interesting in your technology stack. And as I've kind of said before, avoid proprietary technology because quite honestly, the cost of websites is so cheap to produce now that it is almost equivalent to going to WordPress and getting a template or, getting into the proprietary technology and getting someone to build it for you. Similarly with apps, the cost of producing these things has come down so much, especially recently, that there's very little gain to be taking on the risk of worse technology stacks at that next step. Next question is, what are your views on switching from outsourced development versus having in-house teams? When, if ever, should a business think about moving from former to the latter? It's excellent question. I'm a big believer that we partner with companies, and at some stage, it's in their best interest and in our best interest to help them hire an in-house team, hand over smoothly, and let them run. When it comes to when is the best time to do about it, it's really difficult to say because I think it largely depends on where you are in the life cycle of your business. If you've just achieved, let's say, seed funding, and you're looking to now get a product up from scratch, it's the perfect opportunity to bring in an outsourced team because you're minimizing business risk. And also, you're going to be able to get that expertise for them to help you get somewhere super quickly. And what I tend to find is the management of developers or teams or employees at that stage in hemorrhage. Or, in a lot of cases, people won't even reach their Series A because of decisions that are being made in an uninformed, way. whether it's the wrong database or the wrong stack, or they want to just experiment or do something in that sense. When you're in kind of Series A, that's another opportunity to kind of like bump up outsourced team or start to use that to hire an in-house team. If you've had a look at the market recently in terms of like who's available for full-time work, there's quite an abundance of software developers, designers, and things like that. My warning is that the quality it seems to be very low. So I've seen so many companies at the moment that are hiring in-house people and are just having to let people go within 6 to 12 months just because they've not quite got the experience or they're not what they're looking for. The advantage of an outsourced development team is if you need to move or have an extra designer or you don't need a designer anymore, you've got the flexibility. So have a real think about like where you are in your life cycle. And I think you've got to make your own judgment call in terms of risk and how stable you are. Yeah. I believe that is all questions done. Imogen's just said she's going to conduct a quick poll. So I would love if you could just go down to the triangle, square, circle button, I believe, and there should be a poll. Apologies. I can indeed. It's quite a few slides. There you go. So I appreciate everyone's joined a little bit late. There is a quick poll. This webinar has been very much designed with these 6 buckets in mind. So I've not gone overly technical in this one, but if there is appetite for a technical webinar, I'm more than happy to do that as well. While you're all figuring out the poll, I have had one more question as well from Julie. Advanced AI technology offers many opportunities for individuals and small teams. Do you have any experience or suggestions for getting started? How should individual innovators or small teams begin an AI-driven innovation project? What steps would you take to create valuable solutions when moving forward? So it's a really great question. So there's 2 sides to it, I suppose. It depends if you want to use it as an internal tool or if you're looking to include it into your product. So as an internal tool, I would very much advocate for AI solutions. They are very much increasing the productivity of people. And you're able to accomplish a lot more in a short amount of time. That is largely due to like ChatGPT functionality, if I'm honest, and OpenAI. Anything in terms of like text, audio, document creation is almost been revolutionized. So I would strongly advocate you can get like ChatGPT based team subscriptions or Microsoft GitHub Copilot subscriptions for coders, or even help in like Figma. Those would be great tools for a team. Because there's no upfront cost for those, I'd strongly recommend you just let your team experiment and see if it's useful for them. I did an experiment at my company, another company, to see if people preferred using ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot for coding. And it came like 50-50 as well. So I think it's still very early on for like a clear winner. But yeah, in terms of the use for the company, strongly advocate to just experiment, pay the low cost it'll be, and just see if people respond well. In terms of trying to include something in your product, it depends if you have the data, or it depends if you want to do a warm start. If you have the data, it can be a little bit more involved where you have to go down either the training or the fine training route. The fine training can be much faster. You should be able to get up and running, I would say, in less than a week to have some sort of AI-based product MVP to experiment with customers or just see in-house if it's something that would be used. Companies we've worked with might do a hackathon or something along those lines to get their existing team to go about doing that. Um, Outside of that, we're looking at a potentially cold start situation. So when I say cold start, what I mean is that there's no pre-existing model we want to use. So we don't want to advance ChatGPT functionality. We don't want to advance someone's image recognition functionality. In those cases, it's a little bit more complicated. What I would strongly suggest is that you need to figure out what you're trying to solve ahead of time, whether that might be like a health indicator or a document review or something which might be custom to yourself, Julie, and then try and get something up and running quite quickly just to see how complex it's going to be. The challenge there is normally getting your data together and collected, but if it's in quite a structured format, it should be able to happen quite quickly. I normally recommend, again, try and do like an MVP creation first and just see if you can quite quickly, in less than a week, get something up and running with a low baseline and just see how you can get it from there. I'm hoping that answers your question. But if it doesn't, please do submit the question and I'll see if I can answer that one as well. Brilliant. I'm just checking the poll super quickly. Nice. Okay, interesting. So we've had validating your product and strong tech foundations, which is excellent. You're looking for practical tips to avoid common technology pitfalls. That's a really crucial one. My tips at the end will kind of suggest then, and the last one, of course, is you're struggling with slow progress. That can be very challenging. Yeah, if you do need some more personal advice on this slow progress one, do reach out. The biggest indicator there is going to be how long does it take from customer back to customer. So if that is quite long, that might indicate some really foundational core issues in your technology stack. But yeah, we do offer free consultation, so just do get in touch if you want to chat about that. Right. I believe with no more questions left, that'll be the end of today's webinar. I'd just like to thank you all so much for joining. We're going to make the recordings all available and send them in advance. And just as a reminder, we're also just going to send out a short survey. We'd really appreciate if you just give us a little bit of feedback. And also, we're starting a series of webinars. So if there's any topics you'd love for us to cover or just talk about, please do just let us know and we'll see if we can add them to the list and do them. We're looking at doing like once a month. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoy your day and hopefully see you all soon.